Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, June 1st, 2011 meeting of the Municipality of Anchorage Platting Board. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Lendl Story. Steve Abel.
Here.
Ken Fuller.
Here.
Ellen McKay.
Here.
Anastasia Taylor.
Here.
Jody Moses.
Here.
Daniel Young.
Present.
Brent Cole.
Here.
Amy McKenzie.
We have a quorum, and we've received a request to postpone the first case, which is case S11873-1 Powder Ridge Subdivision, and so it was not included on the consent agenda. And could I have a motion to postpone, please? Ms. Taylor and Mr. Abel seconds. Is there any objection to postponing the case? Seeing none, the case is postponed, and we move on to approval of action summaries. We have action summaries for Wednesday, May 4th, 2011, Monday, May 9th, 2011, and Monday, May 23rd, 2011. May I have a positive motion, please? Ms. Moses moves. Is there a second? Mr. Cole seconds. Is there any objection to approval of the action summaries? Seeing none, the action summaries are approved, and we move on to approval of the minutes. We have minutes for May 5th, 2010, April 6th, 2011, and May 4th, 2011. May I have a positive motion for approval of the minutes, please? Mr. Young. Ms. Moses seconds. Is there any objection? Are there any corrections? Corrections. That was the action summaries. We'll fix that. Thanks. Any corrections on the minutes? Any objection to approval of the minutes? Seeing none, the minutes are approved, and we move on to special order of business. Disclosures. Are there any disclosures? Mr. Young.
In the case of S11680-4 Creekview Estate Subdivision, lots 1 through 11, my firm worked for clients of the petitioner's representative toward common goals with the petitioner's representative. My firm also contracted to the presenter's firm for services on various projects. We have no ongoing work with the petitioner. And I have no financial or personal interest in the matters before the board. I can remain impartial and, in fact, in action as a member of this board without personal bias. My past involvement and personal interests will not prevent me from fairly evaluating the facts of this case.
Thank you. May I have a positive motion that would direct Mr. Young to participate in case S11680-4? Mr. Cole, is there a second? Ms. Moses. Mr. Cole, would you please speak to your motion?
It appears, given the information provided, that the speaker will be fair and impartial, and therefore I move to direct his participation.
Thank you. Is there any objection? Seeing none, you are directed to participate in the Creekview Estates case. Are there any other disclosures? Mr. Young.
In the case S11875-1 Waldeck Subdivision, Edition Number 2, Tracks 8A-4, my firm worked for clients of the petitioner's representative toward common goals. My firm contracted to the petitioner's firm for services on various projects. We have no ongoing work with the petitioner or the representative. My firm worked with one of the petitioner's clients about 20 years ago. I have no financial or personal interest in the matters before the board. I can remain impartial, in fact, in action as a member of this board without personal bias. and my involvement and personal interest will not prevent me from fairly evaluating the facts of this case.
Thank you. May I have a positive motion that would direct Mr. Young to participate in case S11875-1 Waldeck subdivision? Mr. Fuller, is there a second? Ms. Moses, Mr. Fuller, would you please speak to your motion?
So I believe that Mr. Young can fairly deal with the facts of this case on S118751 and would direct him to participate. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Any objection to the motion? Seeing none, Mr. Young, you are directed to participate in the Waldeck subdivision case. Okay. Nothing on the consent agenda for this evening. Oops, Mr. Cole, sorry. Another disclosure. Mr. Cole.
I'm not sure, but I believe that in the case of S11871-1, the Petersgate subdivision, that my partner may have represented Mr. Schuman. The name is familiar, but I cannot say for sure. I don't know of anything that's ongoing right now. And I don't think there's anything other than a familiarity with his name that I need to disclose.
No financial interest, no. Okay. May I have a positive motion to direct Mr. Cole to participate in the Petersgate subdivision case, please? Mr. Young. Is there a second? Mr. Fuller. Mr. Young, would you speak to the motion?
Yes, I intend to support the motion because there's no financial interest, there's no personal interest, and there's almost not even any familiarity other than with the name. So I will move to direct Mr. Cole to participate in this hearings tonight.
Any other discussion? Any objection to the motion? Then, Mr. Cole, you are directed to participate in this case. Okay. Any other disclosures? Seeing none, we move on. Nothing on the consent agenda for this evening, no old business, which brings us to new business. The first case was postponed to July the 6th, and the second case, which is case S11871-1 Petersgate subdivision. Can we have the staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This case is a request to eliminate the southern 63 feet of a 66-foot wide section line easement along the 1,265-foot long north boundaries of lots 2 through 4, 5A, and 8A of Block 3 Petersgate subdivision. Legal advertisement and public hearing notices were sent indicating that the request also included the subdivision of 5 lots. This request is, or this advertisement is incorrect. It was not until research was done while writing this case that this was found. Thus, as was stated previously, this request is only to eliminate the 63 feet of a 66-foot section line easement along Malcolm Drive. The petition site contains 8.95 acres. The properties are zoned R6, suburban residential, and are subject to the provisions of Anchorage Municipal Code 2140-080. The surrounding area is zoned R6 and developed mostly with single-family homes. Chugach State Park borders the petition site to the east. Access to the petition site is from Malcolm Drive. It is not designated on the official streets and highways plan and functions as a local roadway. Malcolm Drive is improved to an adequate standard, and no road improvements will be required per PM&E comments. The properties are served by private water and on-site system. AWU water and sanitary sewer are not available to these lots. The vacation request to eliminate the southern 63 feet of the 66-foot wide section line easement along the 1,265-foot long north boundary of lot lots 2 through 4, 5A, and 8A, Block 3, Petersgate subdivision, have been reviewed and appears to conform to the municipal vacation policy. The dedicated right-of-way adjacent to the petition lots is 60 feet. This meets the OSH&P 60-foot right-of-way, the required 60-foot right-of-way. Reviewing agencies either had no objection or no comment to this vacation request. The State Department of Natural Resources did state, however, that the section line easement could not be vacated without DNR and DOT approval. Approval from DNR and DOT is a condition of this case. With that said, the department recommends the approval of this plat and vacation request subject to the conditions listed on pages 5 and 6 of your staff packet. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitfield. Are there any questions of staff? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing, and would the petitioner or the petitioner's representative please come forward and state your name for the record?
Yeah, my name is Chris Burt. I'm with F.R. Bell & Associates. I'm representing Doug Johnson and the other property owners for this. We reviewed the staff recommendations earlier today, and we have no issues with any of them. So, available for any questions you may have.
Any questions for Mr. Burt? Didn't start the timer, but he's done.
Good? All right. Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to testify in case S11871-1, Petersgate subdivision? Anyone at all? Mr. Burke, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, ma'am. Pretty straightforward.
He indicates not. So we'll close the public hearing, and the matter rests with the board. Could I have a positive motion on the vacation request? Mr. Young.
In the case S11871-1, Petersgate subdivision, I move for approval of the vacation request to eliminate 63 of the 66-foot wide section line easement along the plus or minus 1,265-foot long north boundaries of lots 2 through 4, 5A, and 8A, Block 3, Petersgate subdivision, subject to the following conditions, and those would be conditions 1 and 2 listed on page 5.
Mr. Fuller seconds. Mr. Young, would you speak to your motion, please?
Yes, I intend to support this motion, and I'm in favor of this because the conditions for the vacation request have been met, as they're documented on pages number 4 and 5 of our packet.
Any other discussion? Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes, and the vacation request is approved. Moving on to the plat. Mr. Young?
Yes, in this same case, S11871-1, Petersgate subdivision, I move to approve the plat for 18 months subject to conditions 1 through 4 on page 5 and 6 of our packet.
Mr. Fuller seconds. Mr. Young, would you please speak to your motion?
Yes, I intend to support this motion for the same reasons as the first part. The request for vacation has and approvals have been met.
Any other discussion? Any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes and the plat is approved for 18 months, subject to the conditions on pages 5 and 6 of the packet. The next case is case S11876-1, Campbell Lake Heights, edition number 8. May we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to introduce myself to the Commission. My name is Karen Iverson. I'm a new planner at the municipality. This is a request to subdivide 2 existing lots into 2 different lots with a variance from 2180-300D to create a lot where the depth to width ratio exceeds 3:1. The variance is for proposed Lot 2A1, and the purpose is to allow Lot 2A1 access to Campbell Lake. Well, I want to point out that the shape of the lot looks similar to a flag lot. This is not being considered a flag lot. The flag lot portion meets the minimum lot width requirements. It provides access to the lake only and does not provide utility or vehicular access. Therefore, the flag lot requirements of 2180-300F do not apply to this case. The property is zoned R1. Both lots are developed with a single-family residence. The property is currently served by public water and sanitary sewer, and both lots have direct access onto West 100th Avenue. The department found all conditions to be met and recommends approval of the variance from 2180-300D and approval of the plat for 18 months, subject to the conditions that are on the memo. Due to a late comment, we had to revise the conditions, and the conditions are on the attached memo. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Iverson. Are there any questions of staff? Before I open the public hearing, it was pointed out that I neglected to cover the procedure that we'll use during the public hearing. The procedure is published on the front of the agenda, and after the staff's presentation is complete, the chair will ask for public testimony, and persons who wish to testify need to follow the time limits that were established by the Platting Board Rules of Procedure. The petitioner and all of his representatives gets 10 minutes. Rebuttal by the petitioner may be allowed when time is reserved. Representative of groups such as community councils or PTAs get 5 minutes, and individuals get 3 minutes. We keep time with this little timer up here, and when you're testifying, the light is green. When you have 1 minute left, the light turns yellow. When your time is up, the light turns red and the buzzer sounds. And if you haven't completed your testimony at that time, you need to sum up quickly. Any individual may have appeal rights relating to any action that the Platting Board takes, and the procedure for appeal is also outlined on the front of the agenda. Okay, so now we'll open the public hearing for case S11876-1, Campbell Lake Heights, edition number 8. Would the petitioner or the petitioner's representative please come forward and state your name?
Madam Chairman, board members, my name is Kenneth Lang. I'm here this evening in behalf of the petitioners Paul and Sharon Mosley, Wilma Carr, and the late Larry Carr. I could spend a lot of time going through the history of the property, but I won't. We've reviewed the staff comments, and they're in support of the variance, and we agree with the conditions they've suggested. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have, and reserve the remainder of my time for rebuttal.
Okay, you have 9 minutes and 20 seconds. Pretty good. Any questions for Mr. Lang? Anyone else wishing to testify in case S11876-1 Campbell Lake Heights, edition number 8? Anyone at all? Seeing none, Mr. Lang, is there anything you wish to add? He indicates not. So we'll close the public hearing, and the matter rests with the board. Are there any questions of staff? I forgot where I am. Are we going to make a motion? Okay. Could I have a positive motion in case S11876-1 regarding the variance? Mr. Young.
In the case S11876-1 Campbell Lake Heights, edition number 8, I move to approval of the variance from AMC 21.80.300.d, design standards, lot dimensions, depth to width ratio.
Mr. Cole, second. Mr. Young, would you speak to your motion?
Yes, I intend to support my motion because the variance request, the standard has been met, and for the specific variance, which could be detrimental to public welfare, that standard has been met. All of the standards have been met and documented on page 4 and 5 of our packet.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes and the variance is approved. Moving on to the plat. Mr. Young.
Yes, again, in the case S11876-1, Campbell Lake Heights, edition number 8, I move for approval of the plat for 18 months, subject to the following, or subject to the conditions listed on page 5 of our packet, which include 1, 2, 3.1 or 3I and 3.2, and also condition number 3C, which is on the memorandum dated June 1st, 2011, on page 1.
And Mr. Fuller seconds. Mr. Young, would you speak to your motion?
Yes, I intend to support my motion because I find that this meets all the standards for a variance.
Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes and the plat is approved for 18 months, subject to the 3 conditions on the addendum. Amended. We are moving right along. Okay, next case is case S11821-2 Henning subdivision. May we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a variance request for the length of a flagpole portion of a flag lot to exceed 100 feet in the urban area. This is a variance request only. The the preliminary plat was already approved on August 9th, 2010 through the abbreviated plat procedure, Anchorage Municipal Code Title 21-15-125. The purpose for the flag lot configuration is for access to public water, not vehicular access. You can see on page 61 of the staff packet the short plat approval. The variance request is for a flagpole lot of 132 feet. The maximum allowed is 100 feet. For those 32 feet, they're seeking the variance. Standard number 1 speaks to there are special circumstances or conditions affecting the property that strict application of the subdivision regulations would be impractical, unreasonable, or undesirable to the general public. Staff believes that this standard is met. The water line is located in Strawberry Road. Extension of the water line through the alley is cost prohibitive. The only alternative is to create a flag lot, as the petitioner has done with this request. Standard number 2, the granting of the specific variance will not be detrimental to the public welfare. The standard is met also. The granting the variance will not be detrimental to public welfare. In fact, it will enhance the public welfare because it will give Lot 1B access to public water. Otherwise, it'll be reliant on a well, which is not desirable in an urban area. Standard number 3, such variance will not have the effect of nullifying the intent and purpose of the subdivision regulations. This standard is also met. The granting of the variance will not have the effect of nullifying the intent of the subdivision regulations. The granting of the variance will simply allow the flagpole portion of the flag lot to have an additional 32 feet. This is a simple dimensional variance. Standard number 4, undue hardship would result from strict compliance with specific provisions or requirements of the subdivision regulations. This standard is met as well. Undue hardship would result from strict compliance with the subdivision regulations. If the variance is not granted by the board this evening, then Lot 1B would never connect to public water, may never connect to public water, therefore remaining dependent on a shared well, which is located on Lot 1A. The department recommends approval of the variance from dimensional standards, lot dimensions, to allow a 132-foot long flagpole portion of a flag lot, subject to 2 conditions. The first one is the filing of a suitable replat within 18 months. That is written down in your packet on page 5. Staff would like to add a second condition of approval. This second condition would read, obtain a variance from AMC 2145-040 buildings to have access. I'll repeat that. This new condition would say, condition number 2, it would say obtain a variance from AMC 21.45.040 buildings to have access. This is the current driveway for these two, the 2 houses that are located on this one lot. Both driveways go to the alley. The petitioner wants to maintain those driveways going to the alley. The municipal traffic engineer and other municipal agencies believe it's a public safety issue that access should be, primary access to these houses should continue to be from the alleyway. Therefore, a zoning variance is needed from the Zoning Board of Examiners and Appeals, and I can speak more to this if you have questions. Finally, there are 2 comments from neighbors that came with your packets. Those are attached. Both of the people that commented opposed the granting of this variance. I'm holding up these supplemental comments that were submitted after the packet, after the report was finalized, but came with the packet to you prior to the meeting. That's all I have. Be happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Any questions for staff? Ms. Taylor.
Thank you. Through the chair, I have 2 questions. The first is, how did the municipality determine that the alleyway is cost prohibitive compared to the access 80 feet west for your water?
Madam Chair, my name is Paul Hatcher. I work for Anchorage Water Wastewater Utility. The extension of water main would have to extend past Lot 1A, the whole length, and go 10 feet into Lot 1B, I believe is the flag lot that they're creating. Strawberry Patch is a 20-foot alleyway, and water has to be separated from sewer by at least 10 feet, so the amount of easement that would also have to be required, it would actually encroach into the existing house. So there's not really enough room to actually put water there to even make it viable, and it would only serve one lot because the lot that is currently on Strawberry is served by water. There's already a water connection there. They're not connected to it, but there was one put in when they updated Strawberry Road a couple of years ago.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
My other question is, through the chair, the comments that we got from the people in the neighborhood make several allegations about the use on the property, and has the municipality looked into that, made any determination about how the property is being used?
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Through the chair, yes, there are two dwelling units existing on one lot. There's a history to this. The subdivision of this one lot into two will correct this issue. There's an existing code enforcement action against the property. The recording of this plat will resolve that code enforcement issue. A member of the public that comments that there's a third dwelling unit, that's been investigated and determined that there is not a third dwelling unit. If the board felt that it was prudent, they could require an additional condition stating that building safety should inspect the third unit to determine that it's not a dwelling unit and is in fact a shed. That is a condition that the board can add. However, as I said, code enforcement went out there and checked it out and determined that even though the person from the public comments that it's a third house and it's shown on the as-built as a shed, code enforcement went out and determined that it is not another dwelling unit, it is a shed.
Any other questions of staff? I have a question. Is the shed that's a possible dwelling unit the most southerly one?
Through the chair, Ms. McKay, yes, it is.
And does it not encroach into the yard?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. If I could, to answer your question most appropriately, if people could flip to page 61 of your packet, you'll see that the preliminary plat that was submitted was originally sort of a front-to-back subdivision, and it was discovered with one lot abutting Strawberry Road and the other one behind it, these two sort of squares, that a subdivision variance was needed, and that this needed to be converted into a flag lot. But to answer your question, one of the conditions of approval on this short plat is condition number 4. It states, move the shed out of the easement or obtain an encroachment permit from affected utilities and the right-of-way division. So that's how that is dealt with. They'll either have to move the shed out of that or obtain encroachment permits.
And then I just would like a clarification on the standard for rural flags is 200 feet, and this is R5 rural residential. How is it that we're using the 100-foot standard?
Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 2185-020, defines improvement areas, and it defines R5 as an urban area, not to be confused with rural area R5A. So for the purposes of, so there's sort of, to keep it simple, there's sort of two parts to our land use code. The first one is, the first half of it has to do with zoning regulations. The second half has to do with subdivision regulations. The subdivision regulations say that the improvements that are required for the R5 are urban, therefore they're subject to the this 100-foot flag lot, maximum 100-foot flag lot requirement.
Okay. Any other questions of staff? Ms. Moses.
Through the chair, can you, one of the public comments references the alley being changed into an actual, having a street name. Can you speak on that or clarify that?
Through the chair, Ms. McKay, the comment that you're speaking about, I'm holding up now, Mr. Reinhold Thiel, I think his name is pronounced. He points out that the alleyway is not a street. It's a little confusing. The zoning code, the first part of our land use code, defines a street as a dedicated right-of-way, except, quote, except alleyways. So it clearly accepts out alleyways are not considered streets. The subdivision regulations, the second part of our land use code, do the opposite and call alleyways a street. Could you remind me your question one more time?
Yes, through the chair. So it was actually a different public comment by Paul somebody. But he says that it was changed to kind of be presented as a street, but it still appears an alley. And I'm asking because to keep in line with the access requirements,
sure.
It is confusing to me.
Sure. Okay. Sorry about that. Through the chair. So there are alleyways throughout the city. Some have signs and are named. Some are not. It so happens that there are 3 dwelling units along this alley that have their primary access or their only access, ingress and egress, is from the alleyway. Part of our code has to do with when things, where things should be addressed and how streets should be named. And the naming of a street and its address have to do with 911 emergency access. It's firemen and policemen and ambulances getting to your house to put out fires and to save lives and that. And that is to say that if the alleyway was not named and these houses had addresses to Strawberry Road, then the emergency services could potentially not be able to find the houses. And so they name the alley and they address to the alley so that emergency services can find the houses. I hope that answers your question. I can speak more to this. Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. And could the petitioner or the petitioner's representative please come forward?
Good evening, Madam Chair and Chair members. Darren Gawley. I'm speaking on behalf of my mother, who is the owner. I'm up from Oregon to speak on this behalf, and what I'd like to do is just agree with what staff has to say, and if I could just address the
the alley and the naming of the alley issue. I'm a fireman, 22 years, and one of the reasons, and I've seen this personally myself, for the naming of an alley is for the 911 situation. I was concerned with my mother's well-being. There was no problem with or trying to be any cause to a neighborhood at all. But we agree with what staff's saying, and I'd hold the rest of my time for rebuttal if I could.
Okay, you have 9 minutes and 15 seconds.
Sorry.
And your last name is Gully?
It's G-A-L-L-E, first of Darren, D-A-R-I-N.
Any questions for Mr. Gully? Ms. Taylor.
Thank you. Through the chair, the planning department added an additional condition tonight at the meeting verbally. Did you hear it? Do you understand it? Do you have any objection to it? It requires you to obtain another variance.
Yes, ma'am. I just came up, as I stated, I just came up to deal with this. This was my first of my knowledge, and I believe I researched the issue that the neighbors are talking about, 21.45.040, and we are, my mom's willing to do anything that it takes to bring this property into compliance, and with the request of the additional variance, we're willing to address anything that needs to be addressed. Nothing against the board now, but moving that forward, if it's July 14th or if it's August 14th, I'll deal with it. We'll definitely take care of that at that time. It's not a problem at all for us. Thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone else wishing to speak in case S11821-2 Henning subdivision?
Hi, my name is Paul Prokopowicz, and I live at 7718 Huckleberry Street.
Could you speak into the mic? Could you speak into the mic, please?
Got better?
Yeah, much better.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll start over. My name is Paul Prokopowicz, and I live at 7718 Huckleberry Street. The back of my property abuts the alley that runs between Strawberry Road and West 78th. I am 100% opposed to the subdivision proposed and recommended by the Planning Department for the following reasons. On the first page of the planning staff analysis, they state that Strawberry Road is a municipal right-of-way that is classified as a neighborhood collector in the current official streets and highways plan. The preliminary plat clearly shows the proposed lots to be fronting on Strawberry Road. Municipal Code 21.80.330B clearly states, and I quote, "The front line of a residential lot shall not abut a street designated for collector or greater capacity on the official streets and highways plan." Municipal Code 21.75.35B clearly states, and I quote, "Lot frontage means property abutting the right-of-way of a dedicated street, private street, or road easement. In no case shall a line along an alley be considered as lot frontage." These two Title 21 laws clearly prohibit the subdivision of this property. The Planning Department has clearly used some smoke and mirrors in trying to justify their approval of this variance, and have clearly not shown compliance with the two codes I've listed above. First of all, they have illegally named the alley Strawberry Patch Place with no authority to do so. Now they want you to believe it's a street because it has an illegal name. The definition of a street is clearly stated in Municipal Code 21.35.20B111. It clearly states, and I quote, "Street means a way permanently open to general use, which afford the principal means of access to abutting property, such as an avenue, place, drive, boulevard, highway, and any other similar public thoroughfare, except an alley." This code specifically exempts alleys from the definition of a street. Municipal Code 09.04.010 specifically states that alleys are not to be used for the purpose of through vehicular traffic. However, the Planning Department is trying to convince people this alley is a dedicated street to be legally used as primary access to these proposed illegal lots. Even the current planning director, Jerry Weaver, made this factual statement in his November 1, 1999 analysis of this same subdivision request, saying, I quote, "The code requires lots to front onto a street, and the alley cannot be considered a street." Now the planning department wants to fool you into thinking if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it therefore must be a duck. So far, the planning department has made the alley look and sound like a street, but it's not a legal street by code or by plat. It's an alley. So once again, I state the obvious. The lots cannot front on Strawberry Road due to Municipal Code 21.8033B, which clearly states they can't front on a collector, and they can't front on the alley due to 21.7535B. They cannot legally front on Strawberry Road or on the alley. Therefore, they clearly do not meet the standards set forth by the Code for subdivisions. This property and owner has a long history of building... Pardon me?
Your time has expired.
Sorry.
Are there any questions for Mr. Prokopowicz? Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify in case S11821-2? Anyone at all? Mr. Ghali, would you care to use your rebuttal time?
Though I respect what the gentleman has to say here, I think that it was addressed. We're not trying to get around an alley or a street or naming anything illegally. It was requested by the municipality to name that alleyway. It was named. It has nothing to do with what's in front of the board currently, in my opinion. As I stated earlier, Paul, if I may, I cannot pronounce his last name, states 2145-040 as an issue here. We're more than willing to not make that be an issue in reference to this situation. We are not trying to do anything to the neighbors. I will point out, though, that the other public comment that you have from Mr. Reinhold, I believe, his house and his entrance and egress, access, and basically he abuts and uses the same alleyway that this property has since 1978. And again, to the board, I respect what the gentleman is saying. However, we're willing to take care of whatever we need to take care of to make that issue go away. Secondly, if you look at in the packet, fire, power, everybody, municipality, everybody says that alleyway is what the primary access is what they want being used, not the properties then being put forward to Strawberry. I believe an issue came up and arises about that alleyway being open, and I think that the people that oppose this, for some strange reason, blame my mother for opening that alleyway, and that's just not the case at all. They make several erroneous and kind of very just bad claims in reference to what my mother does on her property, etc. All we want to do 100% is come into compliance, get this approval, and do what it takes for the municipality and everybody to be happy with what needs to happen legally to have this be approved. I just again, the reference to whether it's an alley, street, or entrance or access, as I said, we're willing to pay the $600 to request that variance and to have that be heard and to have that be approved as well. No smoke and mirrors, no walking like a duck, quacking like a duck, whatever. I don't even understand. I'm just simply here. This is my third trip up here to try to deal with these issues and to make sure that to be quite honest, my father started this in 1999, and the surveyor that was handling this case did not go forward with making sure that this was approved. My dad died of cancer. My mother came up to deal with that and had no idea that she was out of compliance until some issues happened that then she was told that she was out of compliance. Since that day forward, we've been trying to bring this property to great expense of my mother to become in compliance and to do everything that the municipalities ask us to do. I've already buried one person before the completion of this, and the stress and the undue claims and everything that's been put upon my mother, I'd hate to see this not happen and have to be coming up for a funeral as opposed to having this thing go forward. So again, I greatly appreciate your time. I'm sorry that there's any kind of issue with the neighbors. That's not what we want at all. We want this to be right, done right, and once and for all, just approved, so this cannot be an issue. And again, I thank you for your time tonight.
Oh, yes, through the chair. Can staff comment on the public testimony regarding the, I'm still a little gray on that alley access, and I do see that there is another property that is utilizing it, but that doesn't necessarily make it. I guess I'm just a little gray on an alley being the primary. You know, and like he says, when I read it, I felt the same way, that it can't front either of these two kinds of accesses.
Through the chair, Ms. Moses, throughout the city we have alleys, and throughout the city we have houses that are taking their primary access off of alleys. It's highly encouraged in some cases. An example would be when you leave downtown on L Street, driving south, when you're traveling through South Addition neighborhood, there are houses that have that face L Street and have a driveway to L Street. That portion of L Street is defined as an arterial road on the official streets and highways plan. It's a major road, and access to that street is highly discouraged. And so those lots, they've had their driveways to L Street taken away and replaced with access to the alleyway behind their house. This is a similar example. The Strawberry Road is a collector street, and the comments from the traffic engineer and from other municipal agencies, they've said there should be a plat note on the plat prohibiting access to driveway access, new driveways onto this newly built street, and they favor instead for access to these lots to come from the alleyway. That's the preferred access. It's a public safety issue. There are many houses along this alleyway that get access from the alleyway. The issue here is that there's a zoning regulation that says that primary access must be from a dedicated street, and then the definition of a street in the zoning code accepts alleyways. So this is an issue that will be dealt with by the Zoning Board of Examiners and Appeals at a different hearing to deal with this issue only. This is a zoning variance question that is not within the purview or authority of the Platting Board. This is a zoning variance, not a subdivision variance. This will be dealt with by the Zoning Board of Examiners and Appeals on another night.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, could we have a positive motion regarding the variance? Ms. Taylor.
In the matter of case S11821-2, Strawberry Patch Subdivision, Block 1, Lot 1, I motion for approval of the request for a variance from AMC 2180-300G Design Standards Lot Dimensions to allow a plus or minus 132-foot-long flagpole portion of a flag lot, subject to two conditions: filing a suitable replat within 18 months, and Condition 2, added by Planning Department tonight, obtain a variance from AMC 2145-040 buildings to have access. To speak to my motion?
No, not yet.
Oh, okay.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Cole, seconds now. Now, would you speak to your motion?
Now I'd like to speak to my motion. I understand that there are concerns in the neighborhood about what's happening with this lot and the uses that are happening on this lot, but I think we can only deal with the question that is under the authority of the board tonight, and it's a simple flag pole portion variance. And I think that based on the information presented by petitioners and staff, I support the motion.
Is there any other discussion? Any other comments? Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes and the variance is approved. Next case is case S11680-4, Creekview Estates. May we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This case is a request for approval of a three-phase plan with a 60-month approval for Creekview Estates subdivision, lots 1 through 11. The Platting Board approved the original preliminary plat for 18 months on February 4th, 2009, and extended for an additional 18 months on October 6th of 2010. The property is located on the east side of Golden View Drive between Rabbit Creek Road along the north boundary and East 156th Avenue along the south property boundary. The petition site is 26.6 acres and is zoned R9 Rural Residential District. The surrounding area is zoned R6, R9, and R7 and developed mostly with single-family homes. The site contains variable and steep topography, wetlands, drainages, and streams. Little Rabbit Creek bisects the property running east to west. The plat provides an 85-foot stream protection setback on each side of Little Rabbit Creek. Access to the lots on the south side of Little Rabbit Creek is from East 156th Avenue, which is not constructed to current municipal standards. If this request is approved, a time extension for the existing subdivision agreement will be necessary. In addition, private development requests that improvements to East 156th be completed during Phase 2 or Phase 3, whichever occurs first. Access to the lots north of the creek is from Rabbit Creek Road via joint access easements. Public water and sanitary sewer are not available to these lots, and they are served by individual on-site well and septic systems. On-site water and wastewater services request that the petitioner provide a guarantee that Phase 2 will be completed prior to Phase 3 to ensure that the septic system serving the lots within Phase 3 that the septic system serving the lots on Phase 3 are installed. With that said, the department recommends approval of this three-phase plan and preliminary plat for 60 months, subject to the conditions listed on page 5 of your staff packet, with one small revision to condition number 1 that states resolving outstanding conditions of approval for platting case S11680-2. I would like to add the following language: resolving outstanding conditions of approval for platting case S11680-2 as appropriate for each phase. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? Ms. Taylor.
Through the chair, on condition number 3, you're asking the petitioner to provide a guarantee. Are you asking for bonding, or are you asking for an agreement of some
I believe that, through the chair, I believe that is just an agreement, a written agreement to on-site. They just want to ensure that the septic systems within, I believe, phase 2 are installed prior to phase 3.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing, and could we hear from the petitioner or the petitioner's representative?
Madam Chairman, members of the board, my name is Tony Hoffman. I work with Land Tech, and we're representing the petitioner on this case, Creekview, tonight. We agree with the department recommendations as revised, specifically item 1 is I'm the one that suggested that. I'm sure that the way they revised it is what they meant, but we wanted clarified that the conditions of approval be met as each phase is appropriate. So the way he worded it, I agree with completely. Regarding the guarantee for the on-site systems in phase 2, I don't know what I know they want a verbal guarantee. We could do by plat note, I guess. Although that seems kind of cumbersome. Although I think we could craft a plat note that would satisfy that condition to everybody's satisfaction. If staff's amenable to that, we don't want to do it. There's no reason to do a financial guarantee for that. So I'm glad you brought that up. Other than that, I have nothing else to add. If there's any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Hoffman? Mr. Young.
Yes, through the chair, Mr. Hoffman. What are the kind of written agreements for item number 3? What staff said they wanted was a written agreement. Mm-hmm. Is a plat note the appropriate way to do it, or is there another way to change that to a type of written agreement?
I don't know what kind of mechanism, a written note mechanism there is in the municipality criteria manual. I can't think of, there's no written mechanism for that type of guarantee. I actually think, the more I think on it, by memorializing it on this department recommendation approval as a plat note and then putting it on the plat is probably the most sure way to do it. I can't think of another way unless you have a better suggestion. I can't really think of any sort of a form or guarantee written document that gets recorded that would do that other than a plat in this document. So I'm good with that.
Any other questions for Mr. Hoffman? You have 8 minutes and 45 seconds remaining for rebuttal.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to testify in case S11680-4 Creekview Estate Subdivision? Anyone at all? Is there anything else you wish to add, Mr. Hoffman? He indicates not. So we'll close the public hearing, and the matter rests with the board. Are there any questions of staff? Mr. Young.
Yes, through the chair. On item number B3, how should that be worded so that it addresses a plat note? Would it be like provide a plat note so that on-site water and wastewater services knows that Phase 2, can you give us some suggested language, please?
Through the chair, Mr. Young, my understanding, and I apologize, my understanding in dealing with on-site was that they wanted just a written guarantee, did not need to be recorded. Mr. Hoffman suggested making it a plat note. That's 100% fine with me. In terms of the language, I think that that's probably something that Mr. Hoffman and staff can work out at a later date if you would like. I mean, I would like some time to actually think of and come up with a good plat note for that rather than doing it kind of off the cuff.
Through the chair, that doesn't quite answer my question, but I'm not being clear apparently. I'm not asking what the plat note would say. I'm asking what language we should substitute for item number 3 so that the plat note or the written agreement gets taken care of.
And I apologize, I didn't understand you there. Something to the effect that providing a plat note addressing on-site water and wastewater services concern, dealing with on-site systems of Phase 3 being provided on Phase 2. Something to that effect. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, could I have a positive motion on the 3-phase plan, please? Mr. Young.
In the case of S11680-4, Creekview Estates, I move to approve the 3-phase plan.
Is there a second? Mr. Fuller seconds. Mr. Young, would you speak to your motion, please?
Yes, I think this is straightforward and in the best interest of everybody, and so I'm going to support my motion.
Any other comments? Any other discussion? Any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes and the 3-phase plan is approved. Moving on to the plat. Mr. Young.
In the case of S11680-4, Creekview Estates, I move to for approval of the preliminary plat for 60 months commencing on February 4th, 2009 and extending to February 4th, 2014, subject to the following conditions of approval. 1, resolving outstanding conditions of approval for platting case S-11680-2 as appropriate for each phase. 2, resolving with private development a time extension for existing subdivision agreement and the time frame for improvements to East 156th Avenue. And 3, providing a plat note addressing on-site water and wastewater services concerns of Phase 3 to be completed during Phase 2 to ensure that septic systems serving the lots within Phase 3 are installed.
Is there a second? Mr. Fuller seconds. Any discussion? Any objection to the motion? Did we not do that? Did he not speak to his motion? Did you speak to your motion? No. Well, then there should have been some discussion. Mr. Young, would you please speak to your motion?
Yes. I intend to support my motion. This seems appropriate, and it is protective of the environment and the needs of the planning department and the on-site water and wastewater. So I will support this.
Thank you. Now, any other discussion? Any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes, and the plat is approved for 60 months, subject to the amended conditions. Last case of the evening is case S11875-1, Waldeck Subdivision Number 2. No, Waldeck Addition Number 2 Subdivision. Could we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The lot boundaries of this plat will not be changed. Easements will be vacated and in some cases relocated. The purpose of the vacations is to prepare the site for development as a nursing home. The site was formerly a mobile home park and is being prepared for redevelopment now. This plat is not eligible for the short plat process because it was replatted within the last 4 years. The preliminary plat shows all the relevant plat notes being carried forward. Plat note 5 should be removed and replaced with the wording arterial landscape easement. That's in the conditions of approval on page 7. The Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing on Monday to review the request for an amendment to the conditional use permit for a nursing home site. This is just background for your information. Now, in regards to the vacations, the Planning Division has no objection to the vacation of easements subject to the recording of a suitable plat. The adjacent landowner has written comments requesting a drainage easement from his property, tract A2-1, across the petition site being tract A4. The adjacent landowner wants the petitioner to accommodate future drainage upon future redevelopment of his property. Private development will review and decide on how to resolve this issue. The petitioner will be required to provide a drainage plan and resolve the need for drainage easements with private development. That's how these things are handled. You can see that condition on page 7. That's condition 2B. It says submit to private development a grading and drainage plan and resolve the need for drainage easements. Also, the adjacent landowner has written comments requesting the dedication of a water line easement from DeBar Road to his property, tract A1-1 in the north, the petition site. He contends that redevelopment of the trailer court that exists on that tract will not have enough water pressure from the water line on East 6th Avenue, where a water line is located. AWU is aware of the adjacent landowner's concern and has stated that, quote, water flows and pressure are within tariff limits. AWU is not seeking water line easement dedication as requested by this neighboring property owner. You can see AWU's comments in regards to this on page 30 of your packet. The Planning Division recommends approval of the vacation of easements subject to the recording of a final plat within 18 months. The listing of easements to be vacated is on page 6 and 7 of your packet. The Planning Division also recommends approval of this plat, preliminary plat, for 18 months, subject to the conditions A through E on page 7 and 8 of the packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Are there any questions of staff? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing, and would the petitioner or the petitioner's representative please come forward?
Madam Chair and members of the board, my name is Tanya Hickok, a civil engineer and planner with Dulwich CAM. Tonight we are representing the petitioner, Legacy LLC, and with me tonight is Michelle Ritter, a land use planner at Dulwich CAM, and Jerry Hendrickson with Providence. As Mr. McLaughlin mentioned, this application is to subdivide one tract into one different tract with the vacation of several easements. The existing parcel is owned by Legacy LLC, and it is the proposed site of a 96-bed nursing facility and supporting services. This facility will be operated by Providence. The project is currently under construction and has obtained their fill and grade permit for the entire site, as well as core and shell permits for 8 cottages. The Commons building is not yet permitted, pending the conditional use permit that will be heard next week at the Planning and Zoning Commission. The initial conditional use permit was approved back in March, but let me I did bring along one of the boards that we will be presenting on Monday night that shows the configuration of the previous Commons building. The new configuration will move this Commons building to this location. We have been before both the Northeast Community Council and the Western Jack Community Council several times, and they are both in support of the project. This parcel was re-subdivided by the previous owner back in November of 2010 as a short plat. Since this parcel was subdivided as a short plat within the last 4 years, Title 21 requirements require that the platting action is not eligible as a short plat and has to be processed as a long plat. The purpose of this long plat in nature is a housekeeping matter, as there were several easements that were either a remnant of the previous mobile home park or that were, in the case of the landscape easements, mislabeled as I believe, buffer landscaping and visual enhancement landscaping easements that should actually read arterial landscape easements on the west and the southern boundaries. We have reviewed the staff packet prepared by Mr. McLaughlin and appreciate the time and effort that he spent on this project. We have no objections to the recommended conditions of approval at this time and would be happy to answer any questions, and I'll save the remainder of my time for rebuttal.
You have 6 minutes and 52 seconds for rebuttal. Any questions for Ms. Hickok? Seeing none, thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify in case S11875-1 Waldeck subdivision, addition number 2?
Good evening, Madam Chairman and members of the Platting Board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here and request an additional easement on behalf of our client. My name is Mark Cattini. I'm a registered professional engineer with Quest Engineering. Our firm's client could not be here tonight to attend this public hearing and has asked me to update you on his letter. You can find that in your packet tonight on pages 31 through 33. Judd Walker wrote that letter, and he wanted me to give you some updated information. Basically, in that letter, as staff told you, there's 2 issues. The issue of the water, drinking water with AWW, and a second issue, which is the stormwater runoff. The first issue, thanks to a lot of good meetings with AWW, and I want to thank AWW staff for dealing with this so promptly, I can tell you there's adequate water that AWW is going to provide for Judd Walker's future development plans of that project. And that's the good news. However, the not so good news, the water that leaves Judd Walker's property from the south And he's addressed that concern on the last paragraph on the bottom of page 32 and continues on 33. And I can see on page 7 of the packet item 2B as in Bravo and resolve the need for drainage easements. We've been in talking to PM&E, which is Private Development Building Safety now, and they referred us to the design criteria manual, which I'll read. Item 14 on page 2-7. This is MOA's design criteria manual. It says drainage patterns, item 14, drainage patterns shall not be altered in a manner that impedes runoff from adjoining property or otherwise causes an accumulation of water or reduction in flow capacity that may impact drainage from or into adjacent properties. And in this case, it's water leaving our client's property, trying to get across the project of provenances. And so what we'd like to see is an easement be required, and one simple sentence on E as in echo, item 2 on page 7 of your packet, and the additional sentence would go on the end of item E double I. The property owner shall provide a drainage easement across tract A4 for the stormwater drainage leaving tract A2-1. And why do we ask that? Well, for the reason I just read you in the design criteria manual. And furthermore, I'd like to enter in public record figures 2 through 5 of Dow HKM's drainage study on this, where they include our client's property. And the other 2 pages that'll be entered in the public record is showing the storm drain system approximately 60 feet from my client's tract A2-1. And our client, as he said in his letter, will pay for upsizing. He just would like to get a better guarantee that he's going to get an easement where Providence is providing their storm drain system right now. Providence has the benefit on their northeast corner to tie on to a storm drain, a municipality storm drain line. We would like the opportunity on our northeast corner to tie into that same storm drain. Essentially, it's extended through their property to ours. Otherwise, my client will be paying for a very expensive lift station to drain his property. Furthermore, on this here, you can see that the Providence property creates an elevated pad 4 feet above our project and stopping the water. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Keeney? Okay. You're providing the documents that you're entering into the record?
Excuse me, ma'am?
Are you providing us
Yes.
the documents? Any questions for Mr. Catini? Mr. Young.
Yes, through the chair. Mr. Cutini, can you repeat the language that you're proposing that would be added to item E-III?
Yes, E-II, an additional sentence after the words or rights away. The new sentence would read, the property owner shall provide a drainage easement across tract A-4 for the stormwater drainage leaving tract A2-1.
Once again, please, the property owner shall provide a
drainage easement across tract A-4 for the stormwater drainage leaving tract A-2. Leaving tract A2-1.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Mr. Catini? Anyone else wishing to testify in case S11875-1 Waldeck? Subdivision addition number 2. Anyone at all? Seeing none, would you care to use some of your rebuttal time?
I'd like to briefly address Mr. Walker Representative's comments and letter, which I believe begins on page 31 of the staff packet. It's important to note that Mr. Walker is a fairly knowledgeable landowner and developer, and he actually was the previous landowner of the parcel we are actually discussing tonight. Legacy LLC purchased Tract A12 from Mr. Walker in December of 2010. He had re-subdivided the property in November 2010 with the specific purpose of finalizing a land sale to Legacy LLC. In regards to the storm drainage that Mr. Walker references in his letter, we actually already do accommodate the existing drainage according to the DCM number 14 that Mr. Catini references. That was a comment in our building permit for the fill grade permit. So we actually do accommodate the existing drainage from Mr. Walker's property from his northeast corner into our property. However, there is another part of the DCM that discusses future development for post-development flows. When Mr. Walker does go forward and develop his property, at that time the municipality will require an agreement between Mr. Walker and Legacy LLC for that drainage, which is now different than the existing drainage across over property lines. And if you'll notice in the letter that Providence responded to Mr. Walker, I believe that's on page 34 of your packet. Providence is very amenable to discussing future development plans with Mr. Walker, but it really depends on what that development is, on the quantity of the water that's coming across the property line, and the quantity of the water that's crossing the property line. The municipality, PM&E, does have requirements for pre- and post-development flows, where pre-development flows have to match post-development flows because of municipal code requirements. So there's all sorts of other little stipulations that are required, but Providence is well aware of Mr. Walker's desire to have his existing drainage accommodated into our development, and which we already do accommodate, since it was required during the building permit process. As far as an easement, I don't believe that's really necessary, because if you look at the contours of Mr. Walker's property, the elevation difference on the very south side of the property is around 225-foot elevation. On the northeast corner, elevation is around 200-foot elevation. The northwest corner is about 205, 210 foot elevation. So if you were to look at it from a grading perspective, you would have to move the fill around. There's some spoil piles if you look on the site, and if you were to grade the site in a manner where you increase the elevation of the northeast corner, roughly I would say about 7 feet, which would accommodate a 12-inch storm drain line at a 0.3% minimum. You know, the DCM minimum requirements. If you graded that site, you wouldn't need to have a storm drain lift station, because there's actually a 24-inch storm drain line in Boniface that has an elevation of 200.3 storm drain invert. So if you were to grade the site in such a manner, he wouldn't need to have a storm drain lift station at all, that he could actually accommodate it on site. And let's see. In summary, for Mr. Walker to attempt to exact these types of easements against the property that he sold to, was actually the seller of, it seems that it's almost like a bait and switch, where he's sold it to us, but now he wants more easements. And as we said previously, Providence is more than willing to work with Mr. Walker in the future, but with the unknown of the future development of the parcel, it just seems a little too soon. And with that, is there any comments, Mr. Potter?
I'm going to keep this real short. I do have other things to say, so hopefully there's questions. But I just wanted to make it very clear that in the way that I read the DCM, the language that Mr. Catini, my name is Tim Potter with Dowlage Cam, assisting in the rebuttal, that I believe that Mr. Catini actually read it in the context of backwards and suggesting that it's Providence's responsibility to make sure that they can fully move another property owner's water, whether it's current or future development, across their property. And that's not what it says. What it does say is that the property that Legacy has now is responsible to accept existing water that flows at this time, basically in the limited development state that it's in. And that as future development happens on the Walker parcel, that it will be responsible to go through its own storm drainage analysis and make the water that leaves the site match the pre-existing condition or the pre-development condition. So that means there won't be any more water going across the site than what is currently being accommodated. Now, if in full development the Walker parcel is looking to gain the advantage of being able to not provide on-site retention, on-site water quality treatment, and that required by the DCM, it's an unfair advantage. So that kind of clarifies that and the difference between pre-development and post-development. And what we're really talking about, there's been an accommodation of the pre-development for the Walker parcel. In the future, not knowing what is going to go there, there is a separate system through the city's review that will review that in detail, and he has multiple options on how to do that and service the property. An easement, and they can certainly approach Legacy and Providence in the future as it becomes closer to fruition as far as the project. But I personally think it's very disingenuous for a property owner who's had that property in the family for decades, a knowledgeable developer and real estate partner, to sell a piece of property uninhibited as far as those easements go, and then a year later come back, even less than a year, come back and attempt through a public hearing process on adjacent property that they just got full value in a sale to get an easement granted with no cost burden at all. And I don't think it's appropriate for the depiction that's been put in front of you to be followed through to fruition from the Walker standpoint. There are other options and responsibilities that that property owner has. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Potter. Are there any questions for Ms. Hickok or Mr. Potter? Okay, so we'll close the public hearing and the matter rests with the board. Are there any questions of staff? Mr. McLaughlin, you had a comment?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. Ms. Taylor.
Thank you. Through the chair, one of the conditions is to remove plat note number 5, which references buffer landscaping. There is also condition number 10 references buffer landscaping. Is my understanding correct that we will no longer have buffer landscaping on the property? It will only be arterial landscaping easements?
Through the chair, Ms. Taylor, could you point out what which condition you're referring to again?
The condition is on page 7, and the condition is to remove plat note number 5. And plat note number 5 deals with buffer landscaping installation, but plat note number 10 also deals with buffer landscaping. I just wanted to make sure that I understand if number 10 should be modified as well as number 5 being deleted.
Through the chair, Ms. Taylor, that's a good catch. Yes, this plat will have what is recommended by planning and required by code is that there be arterial landscape easements where abutting the 2 arterial roads, and that is it. Something completely different is buffer landscaping will be required with a conditional use permit for a nursing home. There's different regulations requiring that, but those are not easements. So you're correct to want to delete the words buffer landscaping from everywhere on this plat.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, could I have a positive motion on the vacations, please? Ms. Taylor.
Thank you. In the matter of case S11875-1, Waldeck, edition number 2, I motion for approval of the vacation of the following easements subject to the recording of a final plat within 18 months. Easements A through F listed on pages 6 and 7.
Mr. Fuller, second. Would you speak to your motion, please?
Based on the information presented to the board, I think these are reasonable vacations. Appropriate.
Any other comments? Any other discussion? Any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes and the vacations are approved. Moving on to the plat. Ms. Taylor?
In the matter of case S11875-1, Waldeck, edition number 2, I motion for approval of the plat for 18 months subject to conditions A through E listed on pages 7 and 8 of the packet. And I would like to modify condition C to read removing plat note number 5 and modifying note number 10 to remove the buffer landscaping text. And that is the only modification I'd like to make to the conditions.
Mr. Fuller, seconds. Would you speak to your motion, Ms. Taylor?
I believe the conditions that were presented by staff address the municipality's interest in ensuring the appropriate development of this property. And I understand the adjacent landowner's concern about drainage, but I believe the project management and engineering and planning department can address those concerns under currently adopted regulations.
Any other discussion? Any other comments? Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes and the plat is approved for 18 months, subject to the conditions as amended. The agenda contains no appearance requests, no persons to be heard, no reports are listed. Are there any board member comments? Could I have a motion for adjournment? Mr. Young, Ms. Moses, we are adjourned.